Hello, hello, hello. How we doing today? Happy Thursday. What's going on out there? It's a very chilly day here in Scottsdale, but it is sun shining and blue sky. So we got best of three. How's everyone doing? So Chef Will Wagner here, and I have with me today a gentleman that is truly an inspiration. I've learned a lot about him, and I hope you're ready for a great, stimulating conversation. So please welcome Justin. Hey, Justin.
Hello, sir. Hello.
How are you, buddy?
I'm well. I'm well. All is well.
So, what's going on in your world today?
Oh man, been a busy day. It's been a busy day. You know, it is cold and chilly here too. And of course, I'm in North Louisiana, so we're not used to stuff like this too often. And it's a wet.
I remember the Louisiana weather. I spent a year in Kenner, Louisiana.
Come on. Well, you'd be
And
surprised in being that they got snow this week.
wow.
Like a lot of snow, about 6 or so inches of snow, which is one of the rarest things. There's a lot of people down there and they never seen snow in person. Or
That's always
at least not that much, you know. So yeah, it's
yeah, that's always fun when people haven't seen snow and they're driving in it.
yeah. Oh, that's what you'll have people around here. Like we have an Air Force base here, and in 2020 we had a very big snowstorm, and I was like, man, why are y'all so crazy and acting like they're shutting schools and roads down? I'm like, you got to understand, we're not built for this. Like our infrastructure is not built for this.
Hmm.
They do not know how to drive in this. Like you're gonna see wrecks. Like it's different. We're not used to that. Uh, so yeah, it's a little bit different here.
So, Justin, you and I have chatted a little bit beforehand, and so tell our listeners how and what's going on in your world and how you got started on this journey, and just bring us up to date.
All right, today let's see here. I mean, I can go back. So Justin Batterton, 42, got a wife and 4 kids, ranging from the age of 22 all the way to 3. And then I've got kind of adopted spiritual daughter as well that's very involved in our lives, her and her family. So in a sense, 2 grandkids when it comes to her. Um, you know, as far as past, I mean, I come from a long road of went through addiction at a very young age, and I kind of beat that, went through that, and really overcame that. I mean, that was in 2007, so 17 so years ago, almost 18 years ago. Um, I was like 24 years old at that time, so went through that, man. I mean, we can go through a whole journey of that. That's a whole journey itself. But here I am today. I'm a minister, leadership coach, real estate agent, entrepreneur, a little bit of, everything.
So, Justin, what led to your addiction?
I mean, I had a rough life growing up. I mean, honestly, if there's one word to describe my life, I guess it would be perseverance, because it's literally been that way my whole life, is overcoming obstacle after obstacle. Uh, I had parents separated. My biological dad wasn't in my life for a lot of my life. Really until I was like 24, did we really even get a true relationship or start a relationship. Uh, my stepdad, when I was 5, adopted me, so he became my adopted dad. When I was 5, and then when him and my mom split up, about when I was 10, we moved in with my grandmother. My mom, me and my mom, I tell everybody like this, my mom, I love my mother to death, don't get me wrong, but we've always had like a brother-sister relationship, because kind of backtrack, whenever I was born, 2 days after I was born, her father passed away. And then 3 months later, her sister passed away. And she was 17 years old, having a kid in the 80s, so in
Yeah.
early 80s. So, that already was unheard of and kind of looked down on. And then you go through 2 life-changing trauma incidences. And then her life was filled with a lot of issues, just because my aunt died when she was 14 from heart issues. So her whole life has been battling heart issues. So she was also kind of looking at that, one sibling getting more attention, whatever. But so me and her kind of always had a more brother-sister relationship. My grandmother, her mom, pretty much raised me. That was my person. That was the person I drew closest to. That was the one that was my safe spot, the only safe person. Again, I love my family, but looking back over my life, that was the only person I knew I could trust and be there for me my entire life. And so I went through that, and I think that's kind of, I don't blame it on my life circumstances. I'm sure that helped lead, but at the end of the day, I made the choice, right? I don't like to blame circumstances. At the end, I still had a choice in the matter. But that's what I went through, and that's what kind of led to it. And I started using drugs when I was about 12 years old. I think I started smoking cigarettes around 11, 12 years old. Um, Drinking was right there along with it. So it got pretty heavy. I went from just smoking weed to drinking. I know by the time I was 15 years old, I was already tripping acid, snorting cocaine. I remember doing my first line of cocaine at 15. My grandmother actually put me on probation. She found a joint in my wallet. And talking about a grandmother trying to save her grandson, she found a joint in my wallet, called the cops. And I got put on probation at 14 years old for marijuana. So, and that went on for until I was 24. And I mean, it didn't get any easier. It went from, again, cocaine, methamphetamines, and then it went to prescription pills. I was selling. I was even selling drugs in high school, and alcoholic at the same time. I used to tell people, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, but if I look back, I would tell them I was a social drinker, but then I realized I was at the bar every night drinking. So really I was just a social alcoholic. Right. And so that was just my life. I mean, I remember 17 years old throwing up blood because I just drank too much. And not to kind of give a graphic picture, but it is what it is. And so went through that, and then, kind of long story, kind of shorter, but what led me to change was I got arrested, caught my first felony charge for Xanax, was looking at probation. I was looking at jail time. They ended up giving me probation. Well, you would think that would wisen me up, but instead that did not. I guess I was about 22 at that point. And then around 23, or right after I turned 24, I got arrested again. And I just found out not long after that, I actually found out that I was fixing to have a son. And it was a little bit later in the pregnancy because of some other stuff. But anyways, I found out I was about to have, me and the girl were together. Found out I was going to have a son, and I was looking at 5 years in prison. And I was like, man, again, my son was born in April 5th of 2007. I was like, man, I realized my mother went to jail. So kind of backtrack. When I was like 14, my mother went to jail for hot checks. So I knew what it was like to have a parent in jail and how that affects somebody. And I didn't want that for my kid. And I decided, like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it for him. And that was in April of 07. Started going to looking, and I was going to go to a rehab. It's called Adult and Teen Challenge. It's a Christian rehab, pretty much Christian program. And whenever I started making that decision, I was supposed to go in May of that 1st of May. I think it was like May 2nd or something like that. I was supposed to go on a Friday. I remember that it was a Friday. And then come Sunday, I was at the lake with some friends, and I get back in service. This is back in early 2000. So everybody set out to flip phones with no cell service and wrong, and we ain't got text message take an hour to send a text really. But we got back in service, and that was my son's mother telling me he was in the hospital. And not long after that, that same night, he passed away. So it was just kind of show you how bad off I was. Instead of going straight to the hospital like a normal good parent would, I had to make a stop by the dope man's house first to get drugs before I went, and got to the hospital, and I was able to hold him one last time. The doctor kind of came in there and said, we're going to have to make a choice. Again, she was about 2 years younger than me, 2 or 3 years younger than me. I was 24, so she was probably around 20 or so. And thankfully her dad stepped in and said, hey, we can't make these kids make that choice. You can't, doctor. And the doctor made the choice, and he ended up passing away. And kind of knew I still had to make an effort to change, knew I had to do something different. The first day, let's say this, the first day after he passed, I was so, one thing about that life is your friends want to make sure you forget everything. So I got comatose. The only thing it's all a big blur because everybody's just giving me all the free drugs in the world to soothe me. So he passed away on a Sunday. That Monday, I'm just kind of loaded all day long. And then that Tuesday, I was supposed to go in the program that Friday. And I remember calling the director and saying, hey, I don't know if I'm finna go there and let me come. I may be going to prison for 5 years. At least let me go to court. And on that Tuesday, and he said, all right, we'll come right afterwards. Well, obviously, I called him and let him know what happened, or my mom and them did. And went to court Tuesday morning. I know if I'm going to prison for 5 years, going to rehab. Went to about 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they let me go saying I could go to the rehab. I left there 4:30. I was at my son's wake. Wednesday morning, I was at his funeral. And then Thursday morning, I woke up and went to rehab. And couldn't talk to my family for the first 2 weeks. So everything got ripped out of my hands.
So this led up to the imaginable loss of all these people in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Throughout all of this, how did all of the what was the experience with all of this?
At that time, at that time, the death part didn't really affect me. It really didn't really affect me hard until a couple years ago. And I'll get to that in a second. But my son affected me a big deal. I'd always wanted kids, and I remember praying for kids. It's just I've always wanted a son. And it affected me. I mean, it sent me down a spiral. I really think if I would have ended up in jail and not in rehab, not into a Christian program at that, I wouldn't be here today. Because in my mental state, I was either going to kill somebody, kill myself, or going to be killed. Like that was just my mindset at that time because I was so out of it. If I didn't even go to jail, I would have overdosed. There's no question in my mind. Yeah. Because I would have just went on a spiral hill. And so the death part really, in there is when I really began to just decide to change my life around. I looked at my life situation. I looked at who I didn't want to be. Because that's the thing, like even through all the drugs and all the stuff I did, I knew there was something different. I knew I was made for something more than just to be a drug addict. Like deep down, I always knew.
Your faith played a big part of this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Even though I wasn't kind of living for God at the time when I was doing drugs, I always had a heart for God. I was always the guy that would, really kind of, I prayed every night, things like that. But I knew something was different. And so I knew I needed change. And then, so when he passed, obviously, originally I was doing it for him. But then I came to the decision like, hey, I can still honor him. And really kind of made that switch and really pursued. And I remember, to be honest, I was still even though I knew God in a sense, I still was on the fence. And so I remember, guys, so Adult Teen Challenge is a year-long program. It's in-house. Again, you can't even, for the first 2 weeks, you can't even talk to your family. You can't see them for the first month. And if you're not married, like me and his mother wasn't married, friends, I couldn't talk to any of them for a whole year. And so I remember just about, a month in, I was like, God, I broke down a couple times. There was one night I remember just really bawling my eyes out, and that may have been the switch that got flipped at that point. I don't know. But I just remember saying, God, I want more. And if this is not real, then so be it. But I'm going to give you everything I have for this year. The worst thing that could happen is I just go back to who I was. Or I die. But right now, while I'm here, I'm going to give you everything I had. And that's what I did. And I haven't looked back.
Sounds like he had a bigger plan for you than what you thought he did.
Oh, absolutely. Even in there, there was a lot of things that's even some of the roles. Because I stayed with the program. I ended up being the director of a center and helping open one of the centers. I stayed with them for 13 years. And one of my positions was a donation truck driver, right? And every night I got pulled over drunk. And I'm gonna tell you, this is the craziest story. Is I know I've left the bar driving, got pulled over, and I'm on Xanax, everything, fell in field sobriety test, but would pass the breathalyzer test. And to this day, I do not have, so much so that they would tell me, I'm not going to let you drive home, but if you can get somebody to pick you up in your car up, I'll let them do it. And it got to the point, I know this happened at least 3 to 4 times as I'm sitting here thinking about different situations, but off the top of my head, 3 instantly pop in my head. One time I even fell in the field sobriety test so much that they asked to record me because I was passing breathalyzer but couldn't do that. And the cop actually took me home that time. But my mom, I would call my mom and she'd, all right, where you at? Like, she just knew. Tell them I'll be there. She knew exactly what was going on. And
well, how did the relationship between you and your mom, how did all of that develop?
over time, honestly, being I'm a very transparent person. We still have moments. I love my mom, but it's still kind of rocky, but in a sense, I still love her. I call her once a week. I try to see her at least once a month. I mean, I live an hour away. So, we still have that brother-sister relationship, to be honest. My grandmother who raised me, she passed away in June of 2019. And that's when all the grief, I think, finally hit me. Was when she passed away. That one is what sent me on a very big downward spiral, not back to drugs, but it was bad. And then to top it off, so there was a guy that came into my life. He was a spiritual father to me. A lot of times he was a lot closer than my own fathers were. But he passed away in September of 2018 from cancer. And then that following February, my childhood best friend, who was the only friend of mine that was at my son's funeral, he passed away. And then the June of that month, my grandmother passed away. And so I look back over my life, and I had to go through counseling for all that. But that's when grief hit me. I finally had to break down and go to counseling because it really hit me like a ton of bricks. And over my life, so I'm 42 years old, and I'll say this, I'm 42 and I've been to 50 funerals that were of close people, not just funerals. Like, we're talking about close, intimate people, best friends, family members, all those things. At very, and again, that's a lot of people. And actually this past Saturday, I was at one of my best friends, one of my good friends. He was a staff member I had when I worked for Teen Challenge. We were very close. He passed away on New Year's Eve, and I was at his funeral. And at that point, I stopped and think about it. And it's sad I have to think about it, but from January of 2003, January of 23 until now, I've been to between 13 and 15 funerals of close people, aunts, uncles, friends, cousins, which is not, it takes you, it hits you. So that grief kind of hit me. Now I'm good because I went through a lot of counseling. I fell into some deep depression. I just didn't realize it was depression until I was on the outside of it, I guess. So,
speaking of depression, 5 years ago, I was on the verge of ending my life. And I remember one of those feelings being depressed. And I as I look back, it's like, did the actual feeling of depression really leave, or did it just get more manageable? And I know for personally, it just got more manageable. Now, there are great days, there are okay days, and then there are some really bad days. But I look at it in terms as I have more great days now than I do bad days, which is also a very good thing. But I think, when you look at having therapy and really diving deep into how you're feeling about all of these things that happen in life, I was an abused child, mentally, physically, emotionally. It just was not good for me growing up. And when I sit back and I look at it, it upsets me that even in this day with all of our technology and all of our closeness and all of these things, we still have kids going through this type of abuse, and
Absolutely.
we still have people um, working through depression and working through drug abuse and working through all of these things. And I I get a little upset when I see us shipping millions of dollars overseas when we should be putting it at home into our own people and to the health care of our citizens and our
Yeah.
fellow, you know, because
100%.
that's what upsets me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, all is well. You can fix the, borders. You can fix all of this stuff, but let's get to the heart and the roots of our problems as a society and start talking about them, start dealing with them instead of shoving them underneath the rug.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And depression is one of those things, man, and especially with men. That's
Hmm.
one thing, even within my coaching, that's actually one of my pillars of what I built my coaching off of was vulnerability.
Hmm.
Because I believe even in leadership, vulnerability is not talked about enough. And then with men, I mean, men's suicide rates higher than any other, just because we were trained from birth, don't cry, and that's the thing, it's opposite. And I think for me, what really set me on a path to open up is being willing to find those people. Uh,
Hmm.
Part of it was even after the depression, realizing that I really didn't have people. I had my wife, that was it. And even when losing my grandmother, there was a time with me and my mom that it got bad. I mean, we were fighting. You know how death brings out things in people, especially
Hmm.
close people. And it got bad between us. And I remember going to my wife and I said, babe, every time I would go to her about it, she would get angry with me because she's my wife and she wants to defend me. And she's, rightfully so. She's doing her job as a wife. And like, hey, who's going to treat my husband? That type of thing. But I had to tell my wife, I said, babe, I love you and I know you mean well. But every time you do this, it's really throwing gasoline on a fire.
Hmm.
So, like, having to go into that, and that friend of that this past weekend, the friend that passed, he was the only person that was there for me in that time. He was a staff member. That's when I was still with Teen Challenge. And he was the one that was my listening ear to let me get that stuff off. So it kind of hit when he passed away and I was at his funeral. I wasn't going to say nothing at the funeral. And then I had to, because as men, we hold so much in.
Hmm.
We try to carry the weight on our shoulder and feel like we don't have anybody, but that's a lie that the enemy has told us so many years. And if going back to the Bible and looking at throughout Scripture, all great men of God in the Bible even had somebody to go to. You look at David; he had Jonathan. I tell people all the time, David wouldn't have been the king he was if he didn't have a Jonathan. Paul had Barnabas and Timothy, and everybody had somebody. And so, as being willing to, as men, don't go with what the status quo says, but open up and be who you are. Um, and that's part of leadership for me is leadership is being willing to do that, being willing to be open with somebody because we hold so much in as leaders, as men and people that we try to carry these weights that we are not meant to carry. And that's where God comes in. And that for me, I can look now and if I compare when it's talking about if depression is still there, man, for me personally, I don't feel it is because I just really, I look at who I was and I see that darkness. Like I can almost physically see the darkness that was around me at that time. And now it's like, it took me really digging in and seeing, all right, God, who am I? Who do you say I am? And just really seeking Him and really pursuing Him with everything I had. But then at the same time, looking at my own issues, being willing to face up to where I've done wrong and face up to the things I know I've done, and really face them head on. And part of it is that trauma that I went through with all the stuff with my family, facing it instead of stuffing it and just say, okay, this happened, let's deal with it.
So
And that's
what was the program that we went through? Walk us through that.
so Adult Teen Challenge. It's a faith-based program and it helps men and women to get off of drugs and alcohol. So it's not an AA, 12-step program, which, look, that works for some people. It does. But this is you really eat, sleep, and breathe the Word of God. I mean, it's a discipleship program. You wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is read your Bible. You have classes that are all based around the Bible. But then you also have what we call work detail, which is the way I described it to you when I had students coming in and their parents. You have class in the morning time, and you would have work detail in the afternoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we had work all day long, then we wouldn't have nothing to apply, right? Or learn anything. But if we had class and just sitting there reading the Bible every day, well, how would we learn to put this thing into practice? And there's an old saying I always like to quote, and it's by the wise Mr. Miyagi. And it's in it's in the Karate Kid that not many people like, the one with the girl. I can't remember if that's which kicks back or whatever, but all us 80s and early 90s, we know this, but it was one with the girl that nobody watched. But he says a quote in there that sticks with me in a lot of things I do. It says, knowledge without application is like a boat on dry land.
Yeah.
And so if I take all these things from the Bible and I don't apply them to my life, it's just knowledge. That's all it is. It's nothing. And that goes for any books that we read and things that we're trying to, anything like, all right, I learned stuff about myself. Okay, I've got knowledge about myself. How am I going to apply it so I can be different? So that's the thing. It's like we have to really work on those things. And with that program, that's what we did is we, you had chapel services. You went to church 2 times a week. You really dig in. You had to do book reports on the Bible, book reports on Christian books. You had to memorize scripture. You had character qualities you had to memorize and write goal. And that's another part of it is with the scriptures and the goals. I mean, in the character qualities, part of the task of memorizing them is you had to set goals and apply those goals. And you had to be something that was achievable within the next 3 days. And so, which was a big laying foundation of my life of setting goals. I'm a big goal person because of that. Because I set yearly goals. I try to set really trying to dig in any way.
What were some of the goals?
You really set them yourself. That's the thing is with the goals there, you set them yourself. So it may be, trying to think of something off the top of my head. You can really, it doesn't necessarily have to be about said scripture. Well, it does, especially character quality ones. But say you want to do love, right? Well, okay, what's one goal I can do to show love to somebody? I can help this man with his chore. Do my chore still, but go help him do his.
Right.
Or, something like that. Just you set goals based around it to go that extra mile, whatever it is. I'm instead of reading my devotion in the morning and night like I'm required to, I'm going to read it on my break. Or I'm going to come in here instead of playing games or hanging out with all the fellas at night, I'm going to go spend extra time reading my Bible or spend some extra time praying. So things like that.
Right. Okay. So how did this shape where you are now?
Well, I mean, one, it gave me my relationship with God,
Okay.
truly a true relationship with God. And not just, okay, I know God. And then it set me on a path of who I am as a man, really discovering myself and who I'm called to be. Like I said, I was on staff there and ended up being the director for 13 years. So realizing that I had a call to ministry, to discipleship, this is my view in ministry. As Christians, I fully believe that everybody's called to ministry, just some are called to full time. And what I mean by that, if you're a Christian and you work at McDonald's, guess what? That person in McDonald's sees more unsaved people in a day than most pastors do in an entire month. And that's the thing is like, we have to understand that it's not the pastor's job to do those things. In fact, scripture actually tells us that it's his job to equip us to do those things. Mm-hmm. So it really set me on a path of really discovering who I was and my love for people and to not be about myself anymore. In my drug stage, it was all about me. It was not about my family. It was about me and how could I numb myself? How could I do people over? I mean, I was a very nice drug dealer. I was, but I still had to make my money, and I'm still, in a sense, killing you with my drugs. So,
right.
But I still always had for me, I've always had a heart for helping people. It's just whenever I left ministry, I went into real estate. I'm still in real estate as a realtor, but I knew I couldn't go back to construction because I knew my heart for people and I knew I wanted to serve people and love on people. And that's just my passion. And so when it came into that, and I've been doing that for about 4.5 years, I've been in real estate. And with coaching, I got into coaching. Started the process about a year ago. And how that came is during that time of depression, I also was good. The same time I was going to how I got into counseling was because my coach set it up. I had a spiritual life coach. And really, man, it shaped me so much to help me dig out. So I would once a month, I would go to counseling in the morning and coaching in the afternoon on the same day. And it was like I'm healing from the past, but also learning how to move forward, right? And through that, I realized how much I love just sitting one-on-one. One of my biggest passions is going to sit down with a cup of coffee or just sitting with somebody one-on-one and having a conversation. Even if it's just to hear their story. One of my goals this year is I'm going to start trying to about once a month going and just going to a coffee shop and sitting with some random person just to hear their story. Just no agenda, nothing. I just want to hear your story, because one thing that God revealed to me about a year ago was how there's so many people that have a story, but so many that have yet to be heard, and everybody needs their story heard. And so really pursuing that. And when it comes to leadership, since I got saved, or really even before that, even in my addiction, I was always put in leadership roles. As I was a drug addict and I was put as a crew leader, but not realizing what that was doing for me now. But then when I got into ministry, I really developed a deep passion for leadership. And it was, if I read a book, I was always some reason going to gravitate into leadership. That was just what I'm drawn to in every aspect. I'm a nerd, especially when it comes to leadership. So when I began kind of praying about and seeing what kind of coaching I was going to do, and at first it was going to be, well, you know what, I'm going to help men and help them with some of the issues I've had to deal with. And I just really felt God tell me, he's like, no, I want you to affect the leaders, because if you affect the leader, you can affect multitudes.
So what does leadership mean to you?
I mean, number one, it goes back to John Maxwell's influence, right? It's influence. This is the thing. It's the type of influence. We have to be wise about the type of influence, because again, leadership is influence, but we've all had that boss that was a leader, but wasn't the greatest leader, right? Mm-hmm. He still influenced us in one way or the other. So that's the thing, is influencing them for the better. And as a Christian, as a believer, influencing them for the kingdom and setting them up to live out the lives that God has called them to, whatever that may look like.
So who were some of your great leaders that defined who you are today?
First, it'd be my grandmother. I mean, My grandmother, like I said, she was my mother. She raised me, but she was the one. Like she taught me about service. She taught me about loving people. I mean, my grandmother worked at Walmart for 37 years, and she worked as a manager. She's worked as self-checkout. When she passed, she was still employed at Walmart and worked in the self-checkout. And so she taught me about perseverance, of how to overcome things. And no matter what life throws at you, there's another side to it, right? So I watched her. I mean, you got to think, my mom lost her dad and her sister, but you got to think my grandmother lost her husband and her daughter. And I've lost a child, and I can't even imagine losing my wife. So, and especially not in a matter of 3 months. I don't know if I'm strong enough now to handle that, So definitely my grandmother. Then you had, I mean, the spiritual parent that I told you, he was another big one. He was the one that believed in me. He saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And I think that's another part of that influence and leadership is, as leaders, one of our biggest tasks is to see things in others that they don't see in themselves and elevate them to that things, as leaders, this is the thing, say you're employed with me, whatever, we'll just call it that. Right. And I say, hey, Will, I see this in you. And you may come to like, man, I don't see that. And it's me being willing to take that chance. And even though you don't see it, easily just saying, hey, look, you may not feel comfortable. Let's do this. Finding that middle ground, like, look, let's try it out for 2 months. If it doesn't work out, you can just go back to doing what you're doing. No problem. No foul, no harm, right? But what if you succeed in it? What if you are good at it? So that's that part of leadership, is pushing people to be their best by just seeing things in them they don't see in themselves. Right. And it goes back to that influence. And like I said, so when I first started coaching, I built it on, I had 3 things that instantly popped in my mind of the 3 things, I guess, if you could say I stand on or I believe in. And first, it's adding value. It's when you add value, I'm not just saying before I can add value to you, I'll first have to add value to myself, right? Mm-hmm. So as a leader, I should be stopping and evaluate myself, adding value to myself before I can add value to others. And then you have vulnerability, being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to open up. Yes, you may be my employee and I may not be able to tell you, say I'm just a middleman, but I'm still the manager. I'm still a leader. I'm not going to, as a leader, I'm not to open up to you about all the junk I'm having to deal with my overhead. But at the same time, I can open up to you and admit to you when I made a mistake. I can admit to you where there's an issue within myself or something like that to an extent. So it's being willing to be vulnerable in that area. And then the third one is authenticity and being willing to be the person and being the man God called me to be in all areas. The thing with authenticity is now, especially in social media day, we see so many people trying to compare themselves, trying to be X, Y, Z, because that's what they see on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Even when it's running businesses, right. We may see something that it may be a good idea for your business as a leader. It may be something good as a leader, and because it works for them, or for them it may be, but for you it may not be. And so we go out of our way trying to look like somebody else because we see it working there, but that may not be the vein that God wants us to walk in. And then as a leader in ourselves, it's like, I'm not called to be you. You're not called to be me. And there's a reason for that. And there's people that you will reach for that I would never be able to touch. And that we may live in the same town and go to the same church, but there's going to be people you reach that I can't because you connect with them in a way I can't. And the same thing goes for me. So if I'm trying to be you, I'm going to miss some of the things that I'm called to do because I'm trying to be you. And eventually that mask is going to fall off and I can be my true self. Everybody remembers COVID when we had to wear the mask. What happens? They got hot. We got tired of them, right? So what ended up happening, those masks began to go lower and lower and lower. Mm-hmm. Why? And so picture that mask as our being authentic. You're beginning to slowly see who the true person is. Right. And we can't wear a mask at all the time. So being authentic is the only way to be as a leader. So when you have all those and you put that towards your leadership and the way you lead, there's 2 things I always tell people when it comes to this is, and this is again what kind of go back to, I guess, the framework of where I started with leadership coaching. When it comes to adding value and just really in leadership, when it comes, you look at Jesus, he tells the disciples, he pours into them. He elevates, he's vulnerable with them in times. He cried in front of them when he lost his friend. He's always adding value to them. He's always obviously his authentic self, but then he goes to tell them, there will be a day that you will do greater things than I. Mm-hmm. And I look at it, and even as a parent, and in a sense, as a parent, you're a leader, right? You lead your kids. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to my kids, it was years ago. Both my sons have done this. I got a 3-year-old did it last year. My 9-year-old did it as well. When kids put on your shoe, right? They try to walk around in your tennis shoes, and knowing they don't fit, they look like stinking clown shoes, are about to fall over. But I did something. It hit me, and it was one of those moments that I think and it goes back to when our parents and leaders take those moments to pour in your kid. And when those thoughts or things come to you, speak them. So what I did was I got down on my knee and kind of got right there eye to eye with him. And I said, Josiah, and I did this last, but we used Josiah, my 9-year-old. I said, Josiah, there's going to come a day that I'm not going to fit your shoes.
Right.
And that's that being vulnerable. Fast forward to about a year or so, about 2 years ago, when he's about 7 years old, he does what all kids do. Daddy, I love you. You're the greatest dad ever. And I'm, again, took that moment and I went to him and I got down on my knees and got face to face with him. I said, Josiah, if I raised you to be like me, I failed you because my job is to make you better than me.
Right.
And there's no greater explanation for leadership to me. Everybody we come in contact with, it should be our goal to make them better when they leave us than what they were when they came in contact with us, no matter what that looks like.
Yeah.
Even that person at Walmart, just telling her have a good day. Yep. Make her smile. Don't be that jerk. That's the thing is like, I can't stand, maybe it's because my grandmother was that person, was the one at Walmart, but she gets your groceries wrong. Your waiter gets something wrong. You know what? It's okay. Life goes on. Yeah. It doesn't mean you belittle somebody. Take that time. And so if I see that happen around me, I make sure to let them know what a good job they're doing. To pushing your buggy back. Those little things, it seems small, but everybody's watching at all times. There's always people watching, no matter where you're at. So you have to set the example in every situation.
So you're a leader, you're a coach, you're a dad, you're a husband, you're a spiritual leader, you're a real estate agent.
Mm-hmm. Man, you're making the list sound small, man. I'm like,
when you look at it all, how do you look at how you're going forward? What is the driving force out of all of the things that you do that keep pushing you forward?
I mean, it's at the end of the day, obviously, it's always going to be something to do with your family. There's always that piece where, man, being that man and the husband that my kids need, right? The father, the dad that my kids need, the example, my wife being that husband. But outside of that, man, it's just loving God's people and realizing that people are people. No matter what walk of life you come from, whatever you're going through, showing that love. And just realizing that, man, we're all going through things. Again, my whole life was about going through things. I've went through struggle after struggle, and we've only talked a very small part of those struggles. And if there's something that comes with it, with two of those things, we talk about the struggles, we realize that everybody goes through them. Like you said, you've battled depression. I've battled depression. Like everybody's went through something. So recognizing that people go through things. And so for me, what can I do to make this person's day better? How can I brighten their day? How can I be that person that they need in that moment? And so that's one of the things that pushes me to get up every day is to be the person somebody needs. And then also, I guess this is the darker side of death or the learning experience that I've been through with grief and losing so many people is just how real it is that everybody's not here tomorrow. And making sure that the person that I'm in front of feels that they're the most important person in the world in that moment, because they are. And I think that's what value, when you lose so many people, you begin to realize just how much or how important those connections are, how important those relationships are. I believe that God places everybody in front of us for a reason. And so whatever that reason is, let's take heart on, let's not just blow it by. And let's really just hone in and say, okay, what is it for? But just give them life. Speak life to them.
I look at the simple acts every day. Hello, good morning, thank you. And it amazes me, even riding a simple elevator every morning, that I'll say good morning to somebody and they say nothing back, or I'll hold the door for them and they're just like, okay. And I'm like, where is the common courtesy in our society today? Yeah. And great. I did not have the best of childhoods. But I did learn manners from my father. And he was a Navy guy, so you learned manners very quickly with my dad. Um, but I look at that and I'm like, I still have those manners today. I still hold the door for people. I still uh, please and thank you and all of those things and good morning and night. And yeah, I may walk around with a little scowl on my face every now and then, but I think we all do.
Mhm.
But I still have the basics of common courtesy
Yeah,
in my forefront every day. And I think that's what's escaping our society is we forgot that all of us have things going on. We all have stuff, future, forward, current, whatever it is, we're still
absolutely.
going through stuff. And you just never know what somebody's going through that you could be just one word and it triggers a whole plethora of everything that's coming back to them.
Yeah.
And you know, so
And no, and you're right in that, because that's the thing. It's like you don't know, and that's why you have to be that person. That's why you have to look at it like that and be that person, because we don't know what somebody's going through. That person in the elevator may be going down that elevator after getting the worst phone call of their life, and they're just barely holding it together. There's so many different scenarios we can run our mind through. So it's just, again, being that person that no matter what's going on around us, I can't change what you do, but I can change what I do. I'm not in control of your decisions. I'm not in control of your actions, but I am in control of mine. Even, I teach my kids this when it comes to lashing out or whatever. Oh, so and so did this to me. I said, all right, but what are you doing? And that's the thing, is like, the way I've always broken down to them is this: if you hit me, okay, I can't say, when I hit you back, I can't say it's because you hit me. I made that choice.
right,
I made the decision.
right,
I can't control your decision in hitting me, but I can control how I respond. And any situation we go into, we have to understand that we are in control of our emotions. And that's why it's important to do the things to grow. That's why it's important to really do everything you can to grow within yourself and, kind of be that man, that you're man, woman, whatever, like, be the person you're created to be, because, and it's a work in progress, but we have to learn how to control all of our actions.
hmm
And when we sitting there and we're mad all the time, whatever, man, that's not controlling anything. You're making your day work. It's a choice.
right.
And so making the choice to overcome it, again, we all face things, and learn from it.
Right.
This is
No,
another thing I'm going through. All that I've learned in my life is pain has a purpose.
hmm
All that stuff I went through, it could have made me into a horrible person, or it could have made me into a better person. And it's my choice of how I want it to make me. But all pain has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. And it's finding out what that purpose is. Okay, let's learn from it and let's move forward.
Yeah. The way I look at it is, if you constantly hit somebody with negative after negative after negative after negative, that negative is going to turn around and bite you.
Absolutely.
You know, I I'll be the first one to stand in line and put my hands up in the air. I am not a perfect person. I do a lot of
And
things that probably don't make a lot of sense to people. Um, but it always fascinates me over their reaction to it, how it's so negative and so negative and so negative. And it's like, you know, I look at some people in my life and I'm like, how are you going to be this negative all the time?
yeah,
How can you be this mean? And how can you be this cruel? And, I get that we reflect, our parents, and, we are a reflection of the people around us. And I get it. I truly do. But at some point, we have to stand up and say, enough is enough. I personally am not going to keep being treated like I don't matter and I don't, I'm not important, because I was treated that way as a young child. I am not going to be treated that way as an adult.
yeah,
I spent 29 years trying to hide from the community. I didn't want people to notice. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to be seen and heard and loved and all of that stuff. But you know, ever since I kind of I found my path and my people, I'm like, it's unacceptable anymore to talk to me that way. And I bite my tongue on a daily basis because, you know, I just, it fascinates me how people can go through and talk to them, but they, in return, when you talk to them that back, they get offended.
Yeah.
And I just want to sit there and laugh because, well, you just talked to me that way, so
Mhm.
why are you finding this offensive that it's coming back to you? You
Yeah,
know,
no. And you're right. And that's the thing is like, even in those people, that's where boundaries come in handy. You know, like, look, you've got to set those, and even with family, you got to be willing to set those boundaries.
yep.
And like you made a statement of like, I'm a reflection of my parents. But the thing is, it's like, we also have the choice not to be.
Hmm.
I made a choice not to be like that. Like I said, we'll use my son that passed away. My mother went to jail. I was not going to give that to my son. I made the choice because I want to be different. I want to be the difference maker in my family and be. And if I'm being honest, there's a lot of times it doesn't feel like it's accepted. Not that I think I'm better than anybody, because I don't. If anything, I look worse on down on myself, more down on myself than I do anybody else, because I'm my own
Hmm.
worst critic.
Yep.
Uh,
Exactly.
I beat myself up all the time. But that's the thing is, even in those moments that I'm beating myself up, why am I beating myself up? It's because I want to be better,
Right.
and I want to be better. And it's and realize, and even with all the friends I've had before Christ, before I changed my life, there was a couple years ago, man. They all wanted to hang out, and I was like, I'm not that. At the time, I'm 40 years old. I don't hang out no more. I have a wife, I have kids, I have But then I have one friend, man, and out of nowhere, and this is again childhood friend, known him most of my life, and just started attacking me and coming at me because I'm different,
Yep.
And that's the thing. It's like you have to find your people. It was you got to find the people in your life that's going to get you to the destiny that God has for you.
Yep.
Not in a sense of like find the people that's going to help you elevate you financially, whatever. It's the one that will encourage you, the ones that will lift you up in the time you need to lift it up, but also the ones that are willing to call you out on your junk
Hmm.
in a loving way.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I try to surround myself, is by people that will want to see me better. And so even that friend, I had to block them off because I realized like they're not getting me. They're still trying to live, 20 years ago, 15, 16, 17, we'll say 20 years, but like I'm not that person anymore. I don't
Right.
want to be that person anymore.
No.
It's not that I don't love them. Look, if they need something, all they got to do is pick up the phone and call me, and I'm there for them. But I'm just not that anymore, and I'm glad not to be that. And that's the thing. It's like when people are trying to hold you to a standard, hold you back, you have to come to the realization like these are my people. But at the same time, you made a statement also about finding your people. That's the thing, is find your people. Uh, about 2 years ago, I missed of all that depression. Like I said, I was so alone, and all I had was my wife. And I was at a ministry event, a men's conference. I'm on the board for it, but like here I am, and I'll just be very transparent. I was one of two white guys in that whole place, and that's the thing is I come out of a season of feeling alone and feeling like I didn't have a place, right?
Hmm.
And here I am around some amazing pastors, and they're asking my input. And God, I really felt in my spirit, God tell me, said, Justin, it's not that you didn't have a place at the table. You were just trying to sit at the wrong table.
That's it.
And so that's the thing is like, and even now, of course, I rarely talk to those pastors anymore. Not just so far on. They were more, honestly, I'm friends with the guy that's over the conference, and he was actually there the night I met my wife, and we're still good friends. But even now, like it's taken me now to get to a place where I'm comfortable with who I am. That's the thing is being in your table means you're able to be you, and you don't
Yeah.
have to fake and be somebody else.
Yep.
And so your table, each one of us has a table that God has created for us. Now, there's going to be times in our lives that we're going to go be guests at other tables.
Hmm.
We have some family, friends were really close to them. I love them to death. But I quickly realized, like, you know what? That's not the table God has for me. God moved me out of that season. The season I was in, when I need them, man, they were there, and I still got nothing but love for them. And we go over there often. But that's the thing is, like, that table I'm a guest at. But if I stay there, I'm not going to be where I need to be. I have to go back to the table that God has laid out for me, the table that is made for me, so I can be me, so I can grow, and so I can just really be healthy in who I am, comfortable in who I am, and to fully discover who I'm made to be. And that's for the past 2.5 years. That's been my sole focus. Is like, man, who am I? So many times we focus about what we're called to do, and especially in the Christian world, everybody's like, what are you calling me to do? But there's a pastor, one of my mentors and pastors in my life, he has a saying. He says, we're called to be human beings, not human doings. Mm-hmm. So who am I called to be as a person, as a Christian? Who am I called? Who has God called me to be as a person? And finding out who I'm called to be so I can do what he's called me to do.
Yeah. Yep. So wrapping up here. It's been a very stimulating conversation, and I've enjoyed it immensely.
Very much enjoyed it myself, sir.
What advice would you give our viewers?
I guess there's a couple when it comes to that. One, find your table. Find the table that God had for you. But sometimes in order to find that table, you got to first discover who you're called to be. You got to first discover who you are. And that takes work. Be willing to do the hard work, the dirty work within yourself. When you bury those things, there's a Christian rapper that has a saying. He says, when you bury emotions, you bury them alive because they're going to come back later on in life. And so be willing to dig up those emotions and those things and heal them. Because what we don't, so we'll use the table incident. What I don't heal while at this table or on the way to the next table will be at the next table when I get there. Yeah. What we don't transform transfers. Yep. So being willing to do that work within yourself and, learning who you're called to be so you can be that person, whatever it takes. And then when you get to that table, the next part for me is be willing to call somebody over to sit with you every now and then. Yep. I was telling somebody this, when we go back to the Christian side of things, we're called to make disciples, right? When you're called to make disciples, we're called to be in the junk with people. Being a disciple is not telling you about Jesus. It's sitting through life with you, walking hand in hand with you. I had people in my life, thankfully, that began to do that with me, but they were in the junk of life with me when it was hard. Be willing to be that person to sit down with somebody that's going through something and be that person they need, because fact is, you may be the only person they have. Yeah. And so be willing to be that person and never, ever think that they have somebody. Always believe that they don't, because if you think they have somebody, a lot of times you won't go sit with them. They've got so-and-so, but be willing to be that person. And, whether they have it or not, be that. I'd rather have two than one.
Yeah.
So.
I understand. Justin, thank you.
I appreciate you, sir.
And I will talk to you a little bit backstage. So hang out with us, and we'll be a little bit. So it'll be a few minutes.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, I don't know about you, but I have a lot to think about. And, we go through life spinning on this hamster wheel and just going through the motions. And I encourage all of you to stop and take a breath and look at what's going on. What table are you sitting at? And ask yourself, is that right for me? And ask yourself those questions. So wish all of you a happy Thursday evening and a great rest of your week and weekend. And we will see you next week. So thanks, everyone, and have a good night.